Hey, it's Brian from McKinney's and BIforBuildings.com again. This is tutorial 2 for DataFlare, and today we're going to go over repeaters and how they're used to create lists to create dynamic web applications. Today we'll keep it simple and use a repeater to build a simple list of text objects, but repeaters can be used to repeat any visual element in DataFlare. Once we've opened our DataFlare app, we'll go to Design Mode and open a new DGML file by going to File, New File, and Absolute Layout. The Absolute Layout is a new layout to us in these tutorials, and it allows you to take any object and place it anywhere on the canvas. In order to keep things organized, there are several layout containers available. First, we'll add a horizontal layout to our dashboard. A horizontal layout container will stack objects left to right. We'll drag and drop a vertical layout to the horizontal layout, and as you see, it becomes a child object of it. By selecting this new vertical absolute layout container and clicking Duplicate, it'll add another one right next to it. I'm going to take the parent object and expand it to full size so that it fits the entire original canvas. I'll then do the same for both vertical layout containers. By expanding them to 100%, they'll fill to fit the parent container. As you can see, each now takes up 50% of the parent space. By selecting the different layout containers, you can see how their ratios relate to each other. For this demo, the leftmost container is going to be our navigation panel, so I'm going to take it down to 40% of its parent container. As you can see, the object on the right expanded to fill the additional 60%. I'll go ahead and save it here as demo layout so that we can reuse it later. This is a very basic web application we'll be building. And what we're going to do is on the left side build a list of our hosts, and on the right side do something with a click on that list. Because the container on the left is a vertical container, when we add a repeater to it, anything that's built through the item renderer using the query below, which is the table that will be used to build the objects, will be displayed in a vertical manner. This is a very effective way to build simple lists and button bars. We're going to build all of this with a simple Splunk query, so we'll add a table dynamic property and go down and select Search. The search we'll be using searches the metadata in the Splunk server for a type of hosts, which will list all of the hosts in this Splunk instance. Because this search searches the metadata and not the indexes, we don't need to worry about the time range or the refresh rate. As you can see, this search returns a number of rows with columns such as host, last time, recent time, and total count. We want to populate the vertical layout container on the left with the host result from each row. So we'll double-click on the table dynamic property, which will create a callout and expose it to the rest of the dashboard. We'll take the table property and drag it to the query for the repeater, which will go ahead and add the table to the repeater, exposing all of its rows and all of its columns to the repeater object. By clicking on the renderer icon, it opens the item renderer for the table, which lets you build an additional canvas that will repeat based on the values in the table and query. A simple way to think of it is that one renderer will be created for each row in the table. We'll go ahead and add a text indicator to the canvas and expand it to full size so that it fits the entire renderer. With the property dialog for the renderer exposed, we'll take the host item and drag it on top of the indicator to bind its value to the text object. We'll go ahead and click Apply, and the renderer will create an object in the vertical layout container on the left, one for each row in the table. Again, this is a very simple demonstration, but an item renderer itself can be very complex, essentially its own little dashboard. Because we're creating a basic web app, what we really want is the object in the left to do something on the right. So I'm going to go ahead and add a simple string property to the same exact object and call it host, This is going to give us a method to expose a clicked value. We also need to create a trigger, which will allow us to create the method on the onClick. We'll go ahead and we'll reopen the repeaters renderer object. We've got two options for objects to add the onClick behavior to. First is the text indicator, but its parent object is a more likely candidate. As you can see, it's already inherited the host and trigger dynamic properties we added to its parent container. We'll go ahead and expand the behaviors inspector and add an onClick event. With the click event highlighted, we'll click record state to start the macro recorder. We'll type anything into the host to create a change, click invoke, and click finish recording. This process creates the objects we need to make the click actually animate on the right side of the container. As you can see, the animation created an object called host, and there's the nonsense value we added. By expanding the properties for the item renderer, we can see all of the columns available and drag a column such as total count to the host object. This binds it for the particular row. We still need an object to display the outcome of a click, so we'll go ahead and add another text indicator to the layout container on the right and expand it to full size. We can then go ahead and bind the value we've assigned to host by dragging the host onto the indicator. Nothing appears right now on the host value, but that's just because it hasn't been clicked. We'll click on the Niagara, the ACS Tech, and the BDoc1, and as you can see, the count for each one of those hosts is echoed in the right side. Later in this tutorial, we're going to use the host value on the left to create a dynamic query on the right. So in reality, what we want instead of the count is the actual host field to be echoed out on click. I'm going to go ahead and select the vertical layout container on the left that contains the repeater and expose its item renderer by clicking on the icon. We'll also go ahead and expand the properties on the renderer. As you remember, the group object contains the behavior that allows the click to generate the value on the right. So I'll go back and select the click behavior, select the host object, and as you'll see, it's bound to the old count value. We can replace that by just dragging the host right back on top, and it will replace the count value with the host value for that row. We'll click apply to save, and as you'll see, by going back into view mode and clicking on the objects in the left side vertical container, we're now passing out the host object. Ultimately, we want to do something a little bit more interesting with this click behavior than just setting a label on the right. We can leave the label because, as you remember, the container on the right is also a vertical container. So we can add more objects, like a table grid, to the right size and expand it to full size to fill the area. A data grid's a special object in DataFlare in that it already has its own table. So by going to the data grid and clicking on table, we can expose it and its search property to add a Splunk query. We'll go ahead and add a simple query, like head 10ing one of our hosts, to show you how this works. The data grid has a predefined set of columns, and as you can see when the search query returns, that the only one that matches is row. To specify the columns we'd like to use, go ahead and select Data Grid Header and replace the column names and the fields with our selected columns. For this example, we'll select host, raw, and the time fields. As you probably noticed, the column name is dynamic enough so that you can create a custom column name without having to do a rename in the query. As long as the field matches the search results, you'll be okay. Ultimately, what we're interested in is having the search be generated dynamically by a click on the left-hand side. But right now, the host is hard-coded in the search. I'm just going to go ahead and copy the basic search, go back to the vertical layout container, and expand the host property. I'm going to take the host and I'm going to drag it down to the search to bind it to the search. Instead of using the basic value binding, I'm going to select Custom Expression and replace the expression with the original query. I'm going to replace the hard-coded host with the dynamic value and click OK. You'll see now that the query has been dynamically created using the host value exposed by the repeater. We'll go ahead and close the table, eliminate the exposure, and we can resize the columns in the table for easy reading. We'll go back to view mode, and as you see, by clicking on the objects on the left now, the query will rerun and repopulate the table on the right based on the host value selected on the left. While it's not the prettiest dashboard, I hope this process shows the power of the repeater in DataFlare and how you can use it to create extremely dynamic web applications. I hope this tutorial gets you well on your way to using Splunk to create dynamically driven dashboards and web applications. Thanks again for your time. We'll see you soon.